Hello and welcome to the Focusing Way podcast, Focusing for Better Living. I'm your host, David Battistella. The wind has shifted, we have reset our sails and are exploring new horizons with a new focus on success, leadership, and all things interesting to have more clarity, more focus, and to live a considered life. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Google Play Music, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. And visit our website at thefocusingway.com. Have you ever considered how a lobster develops and grows? What is special about how a lobster develops? Not everyone uses their spare time to read books on the matter, but it's exactly what our guest, Joshua Dick, did in order to help grow a thriving worldwide business. The result is a book that guides readers along an interesting pathway to success. Growing Like a Lobster was motivated by Joshua's sincere desire to help others who seek to build extraordinary businesses. Through sharing his personal experiences and insights, Joshua offers a new way to confront challenges and simple approaches to building special and lasting organizations. Over 15 years, Joshua Dick transformed a small family business into a global market leader in the coffee industry with customers in over 70 countries and distribution facilities on 3 continents. In the process, sales grew more than 25 times, while earnings multiplied over 275 times. After the sale of the business, Joshua has now dedicated himself to helping others who seek to build extraordinary businesses based on what they truly love to do. And joining me now, Joshua Dick, author of Grow Like a Lobster. Joshua, welcome to the Focusing Way podcast.
David, it is a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the book, and I really love the way it's laid out and the concepts because they're so easy to grasp. Can you just talk about what your approach was when you wanted to create a book? Like, it feels like a manual, like something you could pick up and go step by step. Like, what was your approach when you got into the idea of creating this book?
Boy, you really got it. Yeah, when I wrote the book, I realized that I had a very, very successful business career that I was proud of. And I realized that somewhere along the way, there were all these things that I had learned running a business that I wish someone had told me when I was getting started. And the whole idea of writing the book was to put together what I call sort of my no-nonsense guidebook for how to get things done, at least the way I looked at it.
Yeah, no, and it really does read that way, and it's so easy to come back and the way the chapters are structured to be able to come back and have things at the end of the chapter where you've recapped things, so it's easy to reference concepts very quickly and then recall what's been in that chapter. But the one thing that you talk about a lot in the book is the one thing and how important it is to narrow in on one thing in order to grow your business. So can you talk a little bit about that process you had to eliminate most of your product line and the decisions that you had to make to sort of begin to flourish in one area?
Yeah, it's funny. In some ways, I think I benefited from a negative. And what I mean by that is that I entered a business that had been run by my family and had been started by my great grandfather. And when I got there, it was a collection of 7 quite disparate product lines. And what I observed very quickly was that the energy that was required to properly and effectively manage these 7 different product lines led to in all politeness, sort of mediocrity across all of them. And what I decided and what I saw from that experience was that maybe it makes sense to really focus your efforts on doing one thing really well and finding other places in your life or your financial investments to diversify. So I developed this idea that I just want to be really good at doing one thing in my business. And if I have to diversify myself, that's what the stock market's for, or that's what other places are for. But I'm going to dedicate my bandwidth and my focus to that one thing.
Yeah, you mentioned a really nice word in there, and that was energy. So what was your sense of like the energy wasn't focused in the business at the onset when you had first entered it?
Yeah, it's a matter of the distractions that lead to, let's put it this way, a business or a small business or an entrepreneur or an organization or even a family. Sometimes we just have so much capacity, so much energy to dedicate to things beyond living and breathing and eating and loving and all of those things. And if we try to do too many things, we end up doing a lot of things just okay. So I believe there's a limit to the amount of energy that we might have. And I wanted to find a way to focus and dedicate my energy to great success, not just okay success, but what I call extraordinary.
Wow. And so what was your definition of that? How did you define that at the onset?
Defining things was very important to me from the beginning. And in the book, there's a whole chapter about what I see as the importance of articulating in writing your mission and values. I looked at it almost like the Constitution of the United States or of any particular government. So I really thought it was important to put down in paper what it meant to what our target was, what we were looking for, and then I set written standards of what I meant and expected in terms of what success would mean. For me, it was about profitability. I wrote it to be profitable beyond expectations and beyond the norm. And that was just, it wasn't really so much about the money as much as it was that the profitability was a way to evaluate and measure our success.
Tell me, just tell me about Earnex and the services it provided and the customers and its customers.
Sure, sure. So Ernex was a business that was focused, and we talk a lot about the importance of focusing on one thing, only on making cleaning products for coffee machines. Say it again, cleaning products for coffee machines. These are detergents, powders, liquids, and tablets. And what we identified as an organization, as a team, was that if you clean a coffee machine, whether it be commercial or household, it will make the coffee taste better. So we established as the underlying theme of our business the mission of helping our customers make better tasting coffee. And we were able to do that by delivering to them the right form and performance level of different chemical detergents that could help their equipment brew great tasting coffee. And the beauty of that was that we had a market that began just in the United States, selling only in pretty much the New York area, expanded to the US, but eventually expanded into over 70 countries around the world. Again, just selling cleaning products for coffee machines. So by the time the business was sold, it had grown from this small entity based in New York to a business that was operating on multiple continents with distribution centers in Holland and Hong Kong and customers, as I said, all around the world. For everyone from the likes of the type of business like a Starbucks and a Dunkin' Donuts to a Keurig and products even for use on the Nespresso capsule machines.
Mm,
So the full range of products.
wow. But you do also mention that you didn't build or create Earnex to be sold. So can you describe the process you created to be able to happily sell the business?
Yeah, I think I'm blessed by that. I never set out with the mission of selling the business. And I often counsel entrepreneurs and business leaders to not run your business with the goal of selling it. I believe that I was running my business to build an organization that could exist without my presence or with a limited amount of my presence. And I did that because it was my dream to have the freedom and flexibility to run my business and profit from my business while also pursuing other habits and interests. And I called that the idea of creating my own dream job. And what ended up happening over the period of the 15 years that I ran the company was that I came to really love my job. I had found my dream job. It had given me the flexibility to live the lifestyle that I sought and to spend time with my family and to be places with my wife and experience things in the world. So that when the business got to a point where there were approaches of a sale or thoughts of a sale, I I felt like I controlled everything because I was only willing to give up my dream job if someone made it extremely interesting for me to go. And that gave me, as I said earlier, all the power in the world. I was able to pick and choose the partners with whom I wanted to sell, but they became my investors and great friends to this day
Mm.
because I always knew all along the way that it was no problem going back to my office, working with my incredibly talented team and enjoying the experiences and thrills of supplying these products to customers around the world and having the opportunity to visit them and interact with them and learn and enjoy the product of coffee. So the dream job really served me on so many different levels, from the everyday what I did at work to the freedom and control of the sale process.
The book's called Grow Like a Lobster. And in the book, you speak a lot about the molt and the lobster molting process. So I'll just ask you to describe for me and our listeners the molt when it comes
Yeah.
to business and how that became a powerful metaphor and a tool to build your business success.
Yeah, so it was a couple of years after I got involved with running the business that I read just for pleasure reading the story, a book called The Secret Life of Lobsters by a guy named Trevor Corson. It was just a very interesting book about the lifestyle cycle of a lobster. And I was struck by the description of the very, very traumatic experience a lobster goes through every time it wants to grow. Every time a lobster has to grow or wants to grow, it has to rip its entire fleshy body out from inside of its hard protective shell in order to allow itself to expand enough to fill the next shell. And as I was reading that passage about the this just awfully vulnerable, fleshy mess of a creature lying on the bed of the ocean floor, hoping that its new shell would grow and harden before some creature devoured it. I'm reading this book and saying, "Oh my God, that's me. That's what I'm feeling. That's what it feels like to run a business, so vulnerable, as if I just molted." And quickly thereafter, I took to using that metaphor with my team and the organization because I had this realization that lobsters know, in whatever their limited mental capacity is, that there are going to be times where they're going to have to molt if they want to keep living and they want to keep growing. And as businesses, we always want to keep living and keep growing. And I started to talk to my team about, hey guys, things are going great right now. But just never forget that the molt is coming. And we took to that as sort of our rallying cry to use the times in the business when we could have just sort of sat back and enjoyed it, to think about the preparations we needed to make for the future when we were certain to have that inevitable experience of vulnerability that I called the molt. And that meant doing things like anticipating what new hires we might need, thinking about inventory levels, thinking forward ahead about how climatic issues and weather issues might affect our distribution, and planning and preparing all along the way. And somewhere along the way, the lobster became this thing that just made it easier to talk about and visualize the fact that good times are very often followed by difficult ones. And the difficult ones become a little bit easier to handle if we expect them. And that's really where it came from.
Mm. Yeah, no. And I mean, just as you were saying that, I was thinking about like a normal course is like, the importance of setting goals and benchmarks to measure the success of your business and in terms of staying focused and on point. And how did you use those tools combined with like understanding that, the molt is going to happen? And then how did you start to sort of be able to sort of see molting as a kind of a trend? Like, things, you probably saw a few over the course of growing Ernex.
Yeah, I think that there were times when I went through growth where I felt like I was a constant molt. I knew that the business was going up, but it was hard work and stressful and, tiring and exhausting. So I think for me, the molt is about planning and preparing.
Mm.
And the molt is just about that simple reminder that it's not always going to be good, and hopefully it's not always going to be bad. And if we as an organization were able to come to that collective understanding that we have stuff to prepare for, and we can't just expect everything to be terrific forever. um we can be better, and that takes a lot of discipline and a lot of restraint. And it goes back to that thing I said earlier about the idea of knowing when to say no. Sometimes you have to sort of say, you know what, do we have enough energy right now to take on that new product line, or to hire that new person, or to invest in that new facility? um yeah, things feel great right now, but is it right? When's the next molt coming? And can we use that to decide? And on the flip side, boy, if we don't do something right now and we keep growing at this rate, we're going to be in real trouble if we don't hire that person, or make that investment, or find that new facility. So it's that constant. In the book, I use this I like metaphors, I guess.
Yeah.
This idea of driving a car with one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake at the same time. I know you can't do that in real life, but that was sort of my idea of like, let's just take it easy. Let's not try to grow too fast. Let's grow at a consistent, controlled pace. And hopefully that'll serve the business well, and that'll serve our energy consumption well, and it'll keep us from being burdened and overwhelmed as an organization and as a team, and that we have enough bandwidth and resources to do what needs to be done now to keep moving ourselves forward.
That's amazing. And when a lot of what I hear and what you're saying in the writing is like, it doesn't feel like something you kind of did alone, and you don't come across to me as a person that's like, I did this myself. Can you talk about the kind of mentoring you sought out along the way, and the small steps you were taking to fill out, to grow, grow this giant business?
Yeah, mentoring was one of those things. I will say that when you're trying to build a business, you do feel alone, because in some ways you're making a lot of the decisions in a vacuum. But I was really, really focused on reaching out to different people in the industry and even outside my industry, asking them questions, whether or not it sounded like a stupid question or not. I wanted to talk. I needed to talk. And I would go to old professors, I would go to competitors, I would go to vendors, I would go to suppliers, and just talk to them about what they were doing, what they were seeing with their business, how they were thinking about certain decisions. And I even spoke to bankers and accountants and lawyers, and just kind of looked out any place there was to have someone that was doing something similar to me that I could learn from.
Wow, that just brings me right to a question about relationships. And, for some people, that's not the most comfortable thing, to be sort of entering into that zone of relationship with your banker, or with any other person that might be touching your business. And it sounds like you really went to all the resources that you had, cultivated throughout the course of your life. Can you talk a little bit about relationships and what that meant to the growth of Ernex?
Yeah, the relationships were incredibly important, and it didn't come naturally to me. Definitely didn't come naturally to me at first. If you were to do a personality indicator test on me, like one of these Myers-Briggs type studies, which I've been through quite a few of, I always come up as an introvert, as the person who's not out there wanting to engage with people. I'd just as happy to sit at home and hang out with my kids and watch a movie. But because I had defined what it meant to be successful and what I was trying to achieve with the business, I found a way to sort of almost manipulate my own personality to humbly go out and try and find people that I could learn from, I could gain knowledge from. And it worked very well for the business in that I got more and more comfortable with the idea of asking what might be perceived as a dumb question, or exposing my vulnerabilities, which is a little bit of where that lobster metaphor comes from,
Hmm.
and going out there and really just trying to ask and learn and probe, and doing so in a humble way. People tend to be receptive. I find that people in relationships, when you're putting yourself out there and you're exposing yourself and you really are seeking to improve yourself, people want to help. And along the way, I found loads of people that gave me great advice and great counsel.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm just going to go back to your mission statement for a moment, because you talk about how it acted as a reference and a kind of constitution, and a reference document for your business, and how you sort of even revisited it a couple of times, but you worked on it so hard to really define exactly what you were trying to build. But how much impact really did creating that statement have on your business? And why was it so important to create that as a focal point for your business?
Yeah, there are a lot of businesses and a lot of organizations that do write mission and vision and value statements, and they write them as a team building exercise, and then they put them in a drawer and kind of forget about them and never go look back to it. I found that because I had worked in some organizations that were like that, that had these mission statements but didn't reference them and use them, I saw in those organizations sort of confusion about what the right decision was to make at each crossroad. And somewhere I recognized that if I had articulated these things in the mission statement clearly, it might make make life easier. And that was again going back to that limited amount of energy and that limited amount of bandwidth that we have to do things. I realized that the effort that went into writing the mission statement saved me an incredible amount of energy along the way. I could go back, and if a new business opportunity was presented to me, and I could check as to whether or not that business opportunity actually fit with who we said we wanted to be in the mission statement. And time after time, it served extremely well, where we learned that it was okay to say no. I think sometimes the mission statement, having it there, gives you the permission to turn things down. And one of the ways I've seen many different businesses get distracted or lose focus or lose money is that they try to be everything to everyone. And they end up saying yes, 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 because each new piece of business feels like a new piece of business. The mission statement, I think, helps you decide if it's the right piece of business for what you're trying to achieve. And that served me over and over throughout my career.
Yeah, and it seems to go back to taking over, a successful three generation incumbent business and transforming it, right? Like, um, you know, when you can you talk a little bit about how when you're taking over like an incumbent business, especially a family business, how you can be sort of personally invested and how you sort of were able to be able to look at that, like to separate out sort of that whole the weight that comes with taking over a
Yep.
family business. But it sounds like some of that happened in the business that you had taken over, where it was like, that's a good business, let's keep it, or that's a good strand of business, let's keep it, let's not get rid of. And then, but your path was to see that some of what you were holding on to was actually inhibiting your growth.
Exactly. It's funny. I think the other thing and right to your point, that having the well articulated mission statement written down on a piece of paper that you can look at and judge and defining what your goals and objectives are can help you get away from some of the emotional missteps that we might make, particularly in a family business or in any business. If you define what the objective of the business is, the personal sort of biases and connections and relationships, although they're always going to be important, become secondary to the business, what's right for the business. And because we had done that mission work early on, I think I was able to run the business without emotion. I mean, it's hard to do anything without emotion, but I was able to limit the impact of emotion on my decision making and do what was right. And this comes back to, hiring and firing, particularly
Hmm.
letting people go. It's very hard. In my early in my career, it was really emotionally troubling to let someone go, even though I knew they were not right for the organization.
Hmm.
Somewhere along the way, I started to develop this idea that if this business is truly going to achieve the objectives that we have articulated and defined, it's okay to let some people go. And it became less painful to me and more about what I was doing for the benefit of the business. And I learned along the way that a lot of times those decisions that were hard to let someone go from an organization, it was probably better for the employee who was terminated as well because they weren't happy there. They weren't performing and they knew it. So I think all of it comes back together. How do you separate, particularly in a family business, but in any business, the things that are right for the business from the things that emotionally trouble you or challenge you?
It's amazing. Just as a reminder to our listeners, we're listening to Joshua Dick, author of Grow Like a Lobster. Um, What I wanted to get into here, just as going back to relationships for a moment, and the kind of mentoring relationships and your fearlessness, really, to put yourself out there and ask questions to whoever you needed to take your business in the direction you wanted it to go. But what kind of qualities did that help you bring to your leadership and how you led the business?
Yeah, I think I developed an attitude of trying to mentor the people within my organization, because I was getting benefits from conversations I was having with people outside. And I realized that if I could help and develop my team, it was going to be good for them, but it was also going to be good for the organization. And really took it upon myself to hire smart, ambitious people of all different levels of experience. Some had very little business experience, others had more. But what I tried to do, from my experiences, I think, of mentors pushing me along the way, was give them a chance to fail. I talked in the book a lot about the idea of being given a chance to make a mistake. And that really means that the organization puts enough trust and confidence in an individual to put them in a situation where you're not certain that they're going to hit it out of the park, to use the American baseball
Hmm.
reference, but you give them enough room to go prove themselves. And if you give someone a chance to make a mistake, they don't really make so many mistakes. And if they do make a mistake, they rarely make the same mistake twice. And that is part of the human developmental process that I happen to feel like I worked really hard to give to my team and employees. And because I put people in situations that were of a higher level of responsibility than they might have gotten in another organization, I think they paid me back and they paid the business back by contributing at a much higher level than they might ever have achieved in a more limited role.
Yeah. I really love that concept of like giving people, in a sense, giving them the freedom to fail in a way, or to create or to make a mistake. But how did you support that when that happened? Like, because it's bound to happen in any business. But I guess how you deal with that, is the channel then open to be talking about it because you've created that kind of dialogue in the first place?
In terms of the idea or the opportunity to fail.
When something would go wrong, was the level of communication still very high? Did it create a kind of relationship between you and the employee where, in that event that happened, it was something that was on the table right away, I guess, is what maybe I.
Yeah, I think it took a little time. I think people had to step into the situation. I obviously didn't, send someone that was, 2 months out of college to meet with the head of purchasing at Starbucks. We were in the coffee industry or
Mhm.
things like that. But I did put them in situations. Sometimes we would identify situations, in a small, fast growing business. There are a lot of different areas or channels or places that you can look to focus that the risk of failure is actually, or the negative impact of failure is really not such a big deal. You might try and not succeed, but I definitely, I was a little bit cautious. I definitely looked for places to give them chances to pursue opportunities, and if they failed, I was trying to make sure that they didn't destroy the whole business in the process. So I think I was pretty
Yeah,
fortunate that it
yeah.
worked out pretty well most of the time.
Did you ever think about taking this business public? Did that ever enter into it?
It never did. I don't think the business ever got to a scale where that was of interest to me. Um, the path that I took was a sale to a private equity firm. I did have serious conversations with several very, very large publicly traded companies about the business. Again, my experience and my knowledge of public companies is that with being a public company comes a lot of regulatory and reporting requirements, which to me almost feel like one more distraction, one more of those things that can consume your energy. So I was perfectly happy running a private entity, running it sort of under the radar and not having to worry about those outside influences, because I wanted all of my energy and all of the energy of my team focused on making the business great and building a great business. And if eventually it goes public, I mean, since I've exited the business, it has merged with a company, it has acquired other businesses. Maybe one day that becomes public, but that wasn't my interest. I just wanted to build a great business, keep it as simple as possible along the way. And I wanted to enjoy what I did every day because I happen to believe that, we spend more time in the workplace than we do with our family, more of our awake time during the week than we do
Yeah.
with our family. And it should be, if we have an ability to make our jobs and the places that we go for a living enjoyable, that's the goal. And that was really the goal for me.
Yeah. So inspiring. And you've got so much energy right now. And obviously you've transitioned into being an author. What are you looking toward now? What do you see in that little crystal ball?
Yeah, I think for me, the idea of being an author is it was really just something to give back in some way because there are lots of people that can give back in different ways to society. I had a good run, and I realized that there were a lot of things that that I might be able to give to people, and I'm using the book now almost in a mentoring role. I've been sharing it and sharing insights with it through a blog and also through some companies and CEOs and leaders that have reached out to me looking for advice. Some companies in which I've made investments, other companies that I've just known some of the CEOs and leaders for a long time, and they're in industries. Some people are in the coffee industry that I've known for a while, and I've spent time with them. Mostly, the places that I'm helping them is focusing, identifying what they really want to do and be, and helping them articulate that in a way that can consistently help them stay focused and utilize their resources and energies as efficiently as possible.
So, Joshua, just maybe share where we can get the book and or where we can get more information.
Absolutely. So the book is available all around the world on any local Amazon um, account. But there's more information about it on two places. One website is www.joshua-dick.com or joshua-dick.com. And that'll tell you a little bit about me. And it's also a place that you can subscribe to a blog that I write periodically, little tips and ideas about how to build a business or an organization. And there's also a website dedicated to the book at growlikealobster.com. So thanks a lot. And through both of those pages, there's ways to contact me by subscribing or asking questions through the websites.
Joshua, I have to just thank you for bringing so much energy, insight, wisdom, intelligence to this call and to our viewers or our listeners,
Uh,
and to our listeners. But is there anything I left out? Is there anything you want to share that I maybe didn't touch on?
No, I mean, I think first of all, I just want to say thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and it's fun just chatting with you and sharing these stories. It gives me a chance to reflect. I think the key piece of advice for me to people that are looking to build businesses or organizations is just to do it in a way that you're having fun. Stay focused on doing things and don't let yourself get distracted. I think all those three things together play very well. And I see too many places where people forget that there's only so much in us. And if we try and, dedicate on one thing really well, it makes it a lot more successful. Yeah, that's really the big point.
I love that because generally people will say, you've got to have passion. It's got to be passion. But you've brought such a passionate approach to how to run it, and to make the sort of three rules: have fun, stay focused, and don't be distracted. I think that's a beautiful thing that anyone can put on their wall as just a daily reminder of how they can run their business or
I'd be honored.
or a lot of other things. Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Oh, thank you for having me. Really a pleasure.
Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Google Play Music, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. And visit our website at thefocusingway.com.